You guys are cowards. That's what someone actually said to me in the comments recently. Well, not to me specifically, but to classical musicians in general. His accusation on the surface seems really kind of severe, but actually, I think there's something to it. What he was saying was he feels that modern classical musicians are too afraid, too conservative, and they won't put on some of the music that he thinks has been neglected. So, is that true? Are we really cowards? First of all, before I go ahead, spoiler alert, I don't think we're cowards. I think deciding to become a professional classical musician is actually an incredibly brave thing to do, especially in this job market. So let me get that out of the way. First of all, I think there's two categories of music that you could say is neglected by us classical musicians or the people who create the programs. I think the first category, the category that this commentator was talking about, is music by the great composers that you never heard. You know, the Beethoven Second Symphony, the Beethoven Eighth Symphony, not always the Fifth and the Ninth Symphony. Or what about things like Pachelbel? I bet the only thing you know by him is the famous canon that you hear at every single wedding you've ever been to. Or what about Haydn symphonies? Do you know how many he wrote? 10, 20, 30, over 100. How many of them have you heard? And the other type of category that I think gets neglected a lot is music by living composers. There are so many living composers, I think now more than even 20 or 30 years ago. And there's a lot to explore there. And how much of it do you really hear? Some people have said that, well, you always will put the obligatory new work at the very end of your program just to say, oh, I promote 20th century, 21st century music, but your heart really isn't in it. So those are the two categories of music that are often neglected. But the question is there a reason for it? And if so, is it a good reason? The first thing you have to know is that not everything ever written, even by the great composers, is great music. Even the composers themselves said they didn't love everything they wrote. And in fact, someone like Brahms actually burned a lot of his music because he didn't even want it to be found after he died and performed by somebody who was zealous about getting all his works together. So not every composer was at their A game every single time they wrote music. For example, going back to Haydn, if you listen to his early symphonies and early string quartets, they're all very good. They're all very enjoyable. A lot of them sound like the other ones, just to be honest, and not many of them stand out. Or what about all the Vivaldi violin concerti? There are so many of them. Are they all gems which absolutely must be discovered? I'm not sure. I mean, if you listen to them, sometimes you'll say, hey, that should be played more often. I really like that. But I don't think you're going to find that all of them should be played. So just like with pop music, we look back into the 70s and 80s and go, that was the golden era of pop music. I love those pieces. But what we forget is the stuff that lasts that we hear now is the best of the best. And the garbage, and there was garbage, the garbage from back then is just not played now because we've naturally sifted out the better stuff. It's very rare that everything is good by each composer. And then, of course, it depends on what you, the listener, really wants to hear anyway. For example, maybe you really don't like full orchestral works, but you like chamber music. So in that case, you've got Brahms's string quartets. There are very few of those, but maybe you're just totally disinterested in the symphonies. I know there are people who prefer the chamber music over the orchestral music of Brahms, and that's just an example. So does that mean we need to always program every type of music that every composer wrote? The second reason we don't play those pieces that are not so well known is that a lot of times it's personal preference. For me, to learn a piece of music, it takes time and effort. We don't just read the music on stage. As many of you know, it's hours and hours and days, maybe even weeks to prepare a recital. And if we're going to do a recital and we're going to spend that much of our lives on it, we want to do the things that we like. We want to play the things that we find interesting. Sometimes that means we found a hidden gem we want to present to you. But we don't think, okay, I have a responsibility to play only these rare things that people don't hear. So let me go dig through these piles of music and find those things no one's ever heard, and then go ahead and devote hundreds of hours of my own time practicing it so I can present it to perfection. A lot of it is personal preference, if it's chamber music or if it's solo performance music. And with orchestra concerts, The orchestra musicians don't really have any choice in it. There's a person who's directing the program, and there's a board of directors, and they look at a lot of different things in these preferences, and they do audience surveys. So some of it is just personal preference. But is there another reason? Well, yes, there is another reason, and it's a serious one. You have to think about your audience. With high budget ensembles like an orchestra, there are very serious financial considerations they have. And they owe a lot to the audience members, to their donors, to their corporate donors, and to other people who help support their music. And they want to present the music that people want to hear. Is this a problem? I think it can be a problem because it can lead to a very, very conservative programming where you're afraid to take risks and you're afraid to offend anyone in the audience and lose seasoned subscribers. Now, for solo and for chamber, it's a lot easier because if you make a mistake, or not a mistake, but if you program something that turns out not to be so popular, well, you're the one who loses some money or you're the one who loses some audience members, but it's okay. You take it. It's just you. You don't have responsibility for 100 people and all these other donors and things like that. But we have to think about audience building. And as I've said in previous videos, one of the jobs of classical musicians is to make sure that we get our music out there, that we encourage new people to come to classical music. And by new people, I don't just mean young people, I mean anyone who will come. And part of that means, yes, we're going to have to use the big hits that they maybe have heard and didn't realize they knew what they were to bring them in. And they sit there and go, yeah, I've heard that before. I love that. What is that music? And then we have other things on the program that they might like as well. But we have a responsibility for audience building. And it isn't just financial. It's to keep this art alive. And I don't think it makes us cowards to take that into consideration, to say, I want to attract people into this. Now, you could take this too far. I've also talked about people doing collaborations with DJs and dancers and having multimedia things. Do those things. I've done them before if they're interesting to you and if they think they add value. But don't sell yourself out and don't try to do something just because it's shocking or different. Those people who come to those concerts, you may get a lot of people for that concert, but you're not going to get season subscriptions. You're not going to build true audience members. To put it a little bit crassly, do you just want to win the battle or do you want to win the war? You can win an individual battle by going all out with some crazy programming or super conservative programming that brings people in. But in the long run, are you going to draw people in? Are you going to have converts to this amazing music, to this thing that we do? That's the question you should really be asking. So are there any solutions to this problem? It's a tricky problem. I do have some ideas, and a lot of them aren't new, but we have to go back to them. We really have to do them. First of all, the original poster, if you're watching this, I actually have to say thank you. And I said thank you to the person in the actual comments, because it's good to get challenged. You have to accept those challenges. There's always some truth to it. I think that we are not cowards, again, for doing this classical music thing. It takes a lot of guts to say, no, I'm all in. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to worry too much about the money. Whatever the money is, it is. But I want to go all in on this. So I don't accept that. But I do accept the idea that going ultra conservative is not the way to go. Some people say, well, classical music is conservative. Have you heard Bartók's Fourth String Quartet? Have you heard John Cage's music? It's not all conservative. There's a conservative element to it because we want to preserve and present the great works of art that have been around for a while and make them new and fresh. So that's the first thing we have to do, is bring those works to life. But I think if you're doing a conservative program, you can add in some of those lesser known works. Just bring people in. Make sure you think it's a worthwhile work, but definitely program it. Bring people in. They may like it. They may not know that they're not supposed to realize it's not the most famous work by Beethoven or Schumann or something like that. Do that. Now, also the other end of that is we can program more music by living composers, or at least by 20th century composers, recent composers, because Some of the music is incredibly exciting and exhilarating and not gimmicky. Now, some of it is gimmicky, but again, we musicians, it's our responsibility to pick and choose the best of the best, but we can put some of that music in there. I like to think when I do recitals and do chamber music that I take a little bit of both. I put a little bit of the famous stuff in, a little bit of the lesser known stuff by the famous composers, and I do some of the 21st century stuff. It makes for a really interesting program. And hey, I understand it. You're not going to get every person in the audience to like everything you have programmed. That would be rare, but I think you'll get people to at least respect the effort. So listen, some people are going to come for that Beethoven sonata you're playing. Other people are going to specifically come for that contemporary work. And maybe nobody's coming for that Haydn Symphony number 14, but maybe they'll find out, wow, that's a pretty cool piece of music. That's not bad at all. But I think the responsibility does lie with us, the performers. So go ahead, lay it on me. Give me your challenges. I like the challenges. It makes me a better musician. But remember, don't call me a coward. My first challenge was, do you dare to become a classical musician in this day and age? And I accepted it. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think. I bet there'll be a lot of comments on this one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.